Remember to share sound when you
Hey, Matthew.
Hello, good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. How's everything going on your end?
So far so good, but it's the first set in the morning, so we'll see. We're just getting started. So I made you the co-host. You have total control. What I'll do is I will start the webinar 2 to 3 minutes ahead of 9 o'clock. That'll allow participants to join. They won't be able to talk unless you invite them to speak, but they will be able to add Q&A or chat. And then right at the start of the hour, I'll play a short 4-minute video for our sponsors, and then it's over to you to take over.
Perfect. Sounds great. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. Are there any other hosts or panelists?
Nope, just me, and I'm setting up my background now.
Okay, excellent. Well, your sound and video is good. So have an awesome session, and I'll be around if you need anything, just chat me, okay?
Thank you so much. Very helpful.
Okay. All right, Matthew, I'm going to start the webinar and let attendees start to trickle in. I'll start the video right at the top of the hour.
Perfect. After that, I will share my screen.
Awesome. Have a great session.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Eric Matisik, co-chair of Denver Startup Week. Last year, we were able to bring the global audience together for Denver Startup Week, and this year, we're excited to welcome that global audience back as we celebrate and showcase the best of entrepreneurship that the Denver ecosystem in Colorado has to offer. In Denver and beyond, there are lots to explore this week, but most importantly, we're excited that you're joining us. We have nearly 50 sponsor companies who contribute to make Denver Startup Week possible. Let's show our love for these companies today and all week long. Thanks to our headquarters and title sponsor, Amazon, and our title sponsors whose leadership makes this week come to life, Capital One Cafe, the Downtown Denver Partnership, Fluid Truck, Hotel Engine, and WeWork, and our track sponsors who've made all the great content you're hearing today possible, which includes our founder track sponsor, Kickstart, our growth track sponsor, Friday Health Plans, developer track sponsor, Quizlet, product track sponsor, Palantir, design track sponsor, Battery 621 and the Public Works, people track sponsor Exactly, and the spotlight event sponsor, Strat Labs. Our headline event sponsors are bringing this excitement to the entire week. Thank you to B-Side Fund, Colorado Public Radio, Comcast, Coors Brewing Company, Denver Pavilions, Entrepreneurship at the University of Denver, Gusto, JP Morgan Chase, Method, Moss Adams, Pi Insurance, Promontory Mortgage Path, Red Bull Basement, Southwest, Tattered Cover, and the VF Venture Foundry. Finally, thank you to our sponsors and member sponsors who are listed on the screen, and thank you for your support of Denver Startup Week. Now, let's get to it.
Hello, Denver. We are so excited to be here. We're excited to tell you a bit more about the Foundry for Builders program and to be a part of the Denver startup ecosystem. We moved our headquarters to Denver in the last year. and we're excited to call Denver home. Foundry for Builders, essentially we're offering our end-to-end Foundry solution that is deployed to major governments and enterprises worldwide to early and growth stage companies so that they can build their business on Foundry from day one.
Hi everyone, welcome to Denver Startup Week. My name is Ryan Margolis and I'm the Product Track Chair and member of the Denver Startup Week Organizing Committee. Thank you for joining us for the 10th anniversary of Denver Startup Week. At DSW, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow, regardless of age, gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, or sexual orientation. A special thank you to our sponsors for their support in helping us to keep DSW free and accessible for all. Thank you for joining us. Have a great week.
All right. Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Okay. Go ahead and share my screen here and start presenting. Cool. So welcome to Denver Startup Week. Thank you all so much for attending my panel. Today we're going to be discussing approaching data as a product. A little bit about myself. My name is Matthew Fernandez and I am the PPC manager here at Agency 53. I oversee all of our Google Ads advertising efforts for our clients. Largely that focuses on search. We also like to dabble in display, some Bing ads, as well as YouTube and a few other channels that we focus on. But largely what that means is that I and my team deal with a lot of data in a lot of different forms. Google is notorious for collecting data, for better or for worse, and it gives us a lot of data to work with. There's really no shortage of data that we have to manage. And it became very clear to me early on in the role that I had stepped into as manager of PPC that the name of the game wasn't just about managing data. It was about managing data with an end user in mind. That is to say, managing data with a product perspective. So, what does that mean exactly? Well, over the next 30 minutes, I kind of want to talk about some of the distinctions that I've observed between a product mindset and what your typical data manager mindset looks like. Share some success stories with you guys of stuff from my personal experience that I've seen work, and talk a little bit about the future of data management and data science and really where I think this whole thing is going. So, I think it's important to kind of start by setting the table and defining the terms. What's the difference between a product manager and a data manager? Well, let's start with a product manager. What does a product manager do? A product manager does a few different things. And of course, just a little bit of a disclaimer, this is going to change from organization to organization. Different organizations are going to have different needs. They're going to need people to do different things as product managers. But in general, you can kind of expect a product manager at a company to do a few things. First of all, vision, defining the vision for a product. And when we talk about a product, that could mean a few different things. Largely, it's referred to as perhaps a physical product that you would buy or hold. For example, a blender. What a product manager would do there is really sit down and say, okay, what do we want this blender to do? How should it be different from other blenders on the market? Understanding, and this is a really important part, but what product managers tend to excel at is personally understanding the needs of an end user and adapting a product's features and offerings to really meet their specific and unique needs. We've got a ton of different blenders on the market. What can this blender do to meet the needs of a user that other blenders perhaps can't do? And defining success of a product. How do you know that a product is successful? Is it meeting sales KPIs? Is it getting good reviews online? Is it breaking into a market that was previously sort of unbreakable? These are all things that a product manager may consider when assessing the success of a product. In general, the strength that I've seen product managers usually have that makes them the most successful is empathy. That's going to be a key word during this presentation. Empathy and the ability to put yourself in one's shoes and really understand what somebody's looking for is very important when it comes to being a successful manager of a product. Now let's compare that to a typical data manager. What does a data manager do at an organization? Again, this is going to change from enterprise to enterprise, but in general, you can kind of expect a data manager to oversee data collection and storage. So streamlining data collection, really owning the process of storing and making data accessible to members of an organization, especially when it comes to key stakeholders who need to use that data to make decisions. Their job is to really organize it, make sure it's accurate, and make sure it's stored in a way that just makes sense. Compliance. This is a topic that I'm sure has come up at this particular Denver Startup Week, especially, but ensuring that the company or organization remains compliant with data and privacy regulations usually falls under the purview of a data manager at a company. And finally, analyzing that data. Performing database maintenance. This is something that people can major in college. Database management, database studies, managing software, hardware, making decisions as to what needs to happen at the organization in order to best organize and store this data. And in my experience, the strength that data managers tend to have above all else is the ability to be analytical, the ability to look at a problem, unpack it, and essentially move forward in solving it. So why is this distinction important? What is really the big difference here? Well, to boil it all down, there's a lot of different facets to this, but to really boil it all down, product managers tend to find solutions for consumers or clients. They're generally more external facing. Data managers tend to find solutions for organizations that collect a lot of data. They're usually more internal facing when it comes to their problem solving. You may already begin to see where this presentation is going in the idea of adapting the strengths of a product manager to make better data managers. So on that very topic, how can approaching data with a product mindset improve output? There's a few different reasons for this, but number one, more and more in our ever more online world, data is the product. If you work at an agency, you know what this means. Oftentimes, the main deliverable that an agency hands to its clients is data. It is updates and reports on how online advertising efforts are going. It is demographic reports. It can be analytics on how behavior is carried out on the website. Oftentimes, the thing that companies get from agencies is data. And that's a big reason as to why I personally really try to adopt a product manager mindset as I stepped into this role of PPC manager. All of you have probably heard this quite a few times, at the risk of sounding a little bit cliche. Data really is becoming an increasingly ubiquitous part of running an effective business. The businesses that are going to set themselves apart in the 21st century are the ones that can collect data accurately and make good decisions based on that data. And finally, data is very similar to products in the sense that a one-size-fits-all solution rarely exists. There's a reason why there's 40,000 blenders on the market. It's because they generally tend to offer different things, different price points, to fit different user needs. And in general, that's what we're talking about today. Fitting data to fit the needs of the end user. So we've established that data managers are good at using the latest tools to ensure the accuracy and digestibility of data. Product managers are good at adapting the features and processes to suit an end user. When you combine these two, you'll be able to build a bridge between your data and the analytics team's capabilities and the needs of your end users. If we were to kind of boil that down even further, what are we really talking about here? Well, we're talking about managing data with people in mind, and really making that data as accessible and fitting the needs of the end user as much as possible. So managing data with people in mind. And you know what? Even though the most technical term for somebody who does this is a product manager, That's kind of a better title for this presentation overall. I think that hits at the core of what we're talking about today more than anything. So on that note, I would like to introduce you all to my new presentation, Approaching Data with a Human Perspective. Welcome to Denver Startup Week, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. A little bit about me. No, I'm kidding. I won't go that into depth. But what I want to talk about now is, what does this look like in practice? So we've kind of got this idea now that data managers should be considering the needs of the end user above all else in completing their responsibilities. Now, what I'd like to do is just share a few different success stories that we've had at Agency 53 and how we've been able to differentiate ourselves by approaching the data that we have access to with a human product management mindset. Now, just a little bit of a disclaimer. A lot of these are going to relate to the multifamily housing industry because that is the industry that we specialize in. The goal here is not to talk about data in real estate. I think it would be a little bit of overkill if I changed the title of the presentation the third time. But what I want to show you guys is the thought process and the mindset that went into the decisions that we made in order to adapt our product and our processes with the end user in mind. So the first thing I want to talk about today is lead to lease reporting. This is an initiative that was really spearheaded by a few members of the team that I work with. And basically where this came from is the fact that in general, agencies in this space tend to focus on lead generation. We optimize our campaigns, and the thing that we really hang our hat on is the ability to drive leads for a particular client. So when we have conversations with what makes a successful campaign, the industry standard tends to revolve around lead generation. However, we found something interesting when we were speaking to our clients. There was a recurring theme that continued to come up. While lead generation was very important, what was even more important to them was how many of these leads were they eventually converting to leases. This was a step that I think our industry and agencies in this space hadn't quite taken yet. So we set out to try to bridge the divide with a product manager mindset of meeting that end user's needs. Now, the data that we were getting was sound. It was accurate, and we had a lot of it. As mentioned before, Google is pretty famous, for better or worse, for collecting a lot of data. That is to say that the mindset of a data manager wasn't going to be as effective in meeting the needs of the end user as the mindset of a product manager was going to be. So utilizing some more in-depth tracking, we were actually able to build out a framework by which we were able to track how many of the leads we generated from our online ads eventually converted to a lease. And the end result was clear. We had much clearer, much more full picture data that helped us optimize our campaigns a lot better around the things that the clients actually cared about, not just what was the industry standard and not just what was available to us at the time. It led to much better conversations with our clients. We were able to really get to the core of their needs, look at what the data that they were looking at, and really, I would say, speak their language a lot better than what we were doing before. And it really helped our agency to differentiate ourselves compared to others in this space. Unlike a lot of other agencies in this space, we were really able to speak the language of our clients. And that made a huge difference when it came to prospecting and just kind of talking to new people who were learning about Agency 53 for the first time. So by approaching this problem, not with a data management mindset, but with a product management and a more human mindset, we were able to meet a client need that a lot of other agencies in this space weren't meeting. That is to say, we were able to build a better blender. Another initiative that we undertook that really required a product manager mindset was our programmatic budget recommendations that we began to do. So this is another case where the data management aspect of things was sound. We had the most accurate data possible that we were using to make budget recommendations for our clients. What we were looking at was Google spend recommendations, search volume and keyword volume forecasts in order to put together a budget plan for our clients. And while that was successful to a degree, it was another case where we weren't quite meeting the mark with the expectations of the client. That's largely because leasing in multifamily is seasonal and it's cyclical. And Google search volume, while very accurate, we're getting that data directly from the source. It's a data manager's dream to be able to do that. The reality was that Google's search volume forecast doesn't necessarily reflect the realities that leasing managers see on the ground. That is to say, it doesn't necessarily reflect the hot times of the year that people tend to lease. And it was difficult to allocate around that with the information that we were getting from Google. And so a product-oriented solution with the end user in mind and their goals was really what was needed here. The end result, after several conversations and getting data from our clients, we were able to build out a framework that took previous years' leasing data, not available to Google, into account when assigning particular months' ad spend on Google. This was a much better way of doing things, and the results were clear. We were able to apportion budget, not just based on what advertising inventory was available and the interest in Google's projections, but when people were actually the most likely to lease. So if our conversation had really stopped at the data management portion of it, we wouldn't have gotten to this conclusion and we wouldn't have taken this step. The end result, again, was just better conversations with our clients. We were able to build a lot of trust around the financial recommendations that we were making. And it was clear that there was a direct strategy behind why we were making the recommendations that we were making beyond just when people were searching. This also made things much more scalable. Clients tend to have a lot of accounts with us. In thinking about that, we really needed a solution that was scalable, and we found that we were able to essentially automate this program with just a few automatic data exports from their CRM, along with the usual search volume data that's available to us for free from Google. So it was a cost-effective solution, it was scalable, and it just led to better results overall and better conversations with our clients, really more trust at the end of the day. And that right there is really the power of utilizing this product management mindset and having conversations around the product and not just around the data that's available to us. But what if you're not in a client-facing role? The examples that we looked at were strictly related to a client-facing role and not an internal role. Well, what we're thinking about today isn't so much how do we service clients, it's how do we service people. And unless you're like a one-man band or something, there's still going to be an end user, even if you're an in-house data manager. And that has to be considered in considering your processes. So even if the data that you manage will only be reviewed internally, there will still be an end user, and that still has to be taken into consideration. Having a product-first mindset is going to be very helpful with that. Some of the conversations and some of the things that you may need to think about even more when you're an in-house data manager for the end user, who in this case, which will be some of your coworkers, are going to be scalability. Are the solutions that you're suggesting and recommending and the processes that you're building out today going to be as effective tomorrow? Is it going to be cost effective as the organization grows and as more and more data points come into play? And automation. What processes are you doing today that you can automate in order to save time, help that scalability, and essentially help that cost? These are really important as well when you're in the agency experience. These are conversations that I personally have every day with my team. But these are largely what you'll find that you base your KPIs around when you're an in-house data manager. So a couple things that I kind of want to touch on here, and I'm sure a lot of these have come up, especially this year at Denver Startup Week. But as the old saying goes, with great power comes great responsibility. There are privacy and ethical concerns that are at the forefront today more than ever. There are certain solutions as a product manager that you may say, hey, this is a great way of proceeding with the end user in mind that may violate certain privacy and ethical concerns. It's really important to keep that in mind. Diversity and inclusion. I'm sure this has been talked about a lot at this Denver Startup Week, but ensuring that the data that you collect represents as diverse a sample set as possible is going to be important with that end user in mind. As a product manager, you want to make sure that you're building out these products for as wide an array of people as possible, you'll benefit from being able to speak to a wider audience with the data that you are managing. And look, a key idea here that I want to really emphasize, we call it product management, but really data science is the art of understanding people personally. So you ought to be remembering that these wide arrays of data that you're collecting represent people personally. And those people have needs. Those people have needs that perhaps aren't being met otherwise. That's why it's so important to approach this with the mindset of the end user as a product manager would, rather than what your typical data manager would approach a lot of these problems with. Consider your strengths as a human. We're getting to a point now where computers are getting better and better at crunching numbers. Back in the day, the data scientists and data managers of yore were these fantastic mathematicians. There were people who could really personally interpret data and draw conclusions from it. Computers are getting better and better at doing that. And I think what's important to keep in mind as data managers, especially when moving towards this product manager mindset, is to let the computer do what the computer is good at. Let you as a human being do what you're good at, which is relating that data and relating that information that the computer has put together to other people. Computers aren't so good at relating to other people yet. We'll see what the future holds. But for now, take solace in the fact that there is career stability in your ability to take what a computer has sort of put together and aggregated and translate that into an action plan that is people-focused and people-oriented. Finally, I kind of want to leave off today with looking to the future. I personally have found that being a data manager and just being anybody who really works with data, even if your job title doesn't necessarily include the word manager or data scientist in it, it's becoming less and less about personally performing a lot of the tasks that computers are just frankly better at. And it's becoming more and more about taking the output that any system or computer can put together and translating it into the needs and meeting the needs of an end user. So just look at an example that we talked about before, where a product manager might try to build a better blender. So too is it going to be more and more the role of a data scientist or a data manager to translate what a computer has done and really make it fit the needs of an individual. In short, the future of data science lies not entirely in understanding statistics, although that is still very important. Don't get me wrong. Knowing what to tell the computer to do is always going to be an important, very human aspect of this role, but in understanding people personally. We talked about this before in the intro, but Denver Startup Week continues to be committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. This, of course, is an important topic when it comes to data science and making data available to people. So I'd love to leave you with that thought. Thank you all so much for attending my panel. I'd love to open it up to you now. Are there any questions? I will be monitoring the chat. If there are any questions on any of the stuff that we've experienced, great question. I think, so Erica here in the chat asked, how do we know what data clients want? That's a great question. I think it's a question that we sort of answer every day. I think that the best way to get to that answer is just having open and candid conversations with your clients, really getting to know their business model and getting to know them personally is going to help translate to figuring out exactly what data they're looking for. That's really what worked for us at Agency 53. There were just certain things that weren't on our radar. For example, the importance of tying advertising spend back to that signed lease that we wouldn't have really gotten to the bottom of without personally understanding what their KPIs and what their goals were and how they differed from the KPIs that we initially set out with. So understanding what data clients want, I would say a lot of it stems just from personal conversations and really understanding what your clients need overall. Also just understanding the industry, reading a lot about what you know, other people are doing in the space is always really important. Doing a lot of research on what people, what developments and just sort of the direction that developments are moving in your particular industry is going to be really helpful when it comes to divining exactly what data clients want. Because the funny thing is, clients tend to know what they need, but they don't always know what they want in an interesting way. Sometimes it's about translating those needs. In this case, it's, you know, for us, it was more leases into what they want, which is more data around those particular leases. So great question. I'll give it one more minute for any questions that may come in, or if anybody just wants to share any of the challenges that they've personally seen when it comes to managing data and especially connecting with that end user. I'd love to hear it. Okay, well, on that note, thank you all so much for attending my webinar. I hope that this was illuminating, and I hope it sort of got some of the gears turning in some of the ways that you can approach data with a product management and therefore a more human mindset. Thank you all so much. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of Denver Startup Week.